Have you ever thought about what would happen if your perfect life was destroyed in seconds? A multimillionaire CEO and a construction worker are about to discover that sometimes the worst tragedies become the best miracles. The black clouds gathered like a warning from fate, completely swallowing the aircraft while thunder pierced through the cabin like knives. The engines screamed desperately, metal fighting against nature's fury as passengers clung to their seats with knuckles white from terror. Among them, a woman dressed in designer clothes struggled to maintain her composure, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the leather as fear etched itself across her face. Near her, a man with weathered hands and military bearing protected the elderly passenger beside him. His eyes, cold and calculating, remained serene even as chaos exploded around him. The plane plummeted toward the dark waters below, and then, nothing but darkness and the roar of the ocean claiming its prize. She woke with sand in her mouth and waves lapping at her feet. The CEO's designer suit was torn, her blonde hair tangled with salt and seaweed. Beside her, the man stirred, coughing up seawater as consciousness slowly returned. They were alone on an endless stretch of beach, with wreckage scattered like broken promises along the shore. She trembled, her voice barely a whisper against the vast emptiness. "If we can't get back, will I have to marry you?" The question floated between them, absurd yet somehow prophetic, as if fate itself had already written their story in the sand. Nathan Cross had spent 35 years learning to survive. His body carried the map of that education: scars from Afghanistan, calloused hands from construction work, shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of being a single father. The sun had bronzed his skin during countless hours at construction sites, trying to make ends meet for his 7-year-old daughter Lily. She was everything now, had been since cancer took Rebecca 3 years ago. The grief had aged him, carving lines around eyes that had seen too much death. But it had also sharpened his purpose. Every sunrise was for Lily. Every exhausted night, one more day closer to giving her the life she deserved. Olivia Sterling inhabited a completely different universe. At 30, she commanded boardrooms with the same precision her mother had commanded charity galas. Her blue eyes could freeze negotiations or close multimillion-dollar deals, depending on what quarterly reports demanded. The Sterling fortune had prepared her since birth. Private schools, Yale MBA, a corner office before turning 28. Love had been a luxury she couldn't afford, especially after Daniel chose her rival's bed and her father's biggest competitor as his new employer. Trust became a liability, vulnerability a weakness she had surgically removed from her emotional portfolio. They were oil and water, war and commerce, calluses and manicures. He knew how to read wind patterns and track animals. She could read market trends and track insider trading. His hands had held dying soldiers. Hers had held nothing heavier than platinum credit cards. Yet there they were on that nameless shore, stripped of everything that had defined them, equal in their mortality. The island didn't care about their net worth or his purple heart. It only cared that they were soft, fragile humans who needed water in 3 days or they would die. Olivia's first instinct was denial wrapped in authority. She pulled out her waterlogged phone, shaking it as if corporate determination could resurrect dead circuits. "The Coast Guard will find us," she declared, her voice still charged with boardroom authority despite chattering teeth. "My company has resources. They'll have helicopters searching within hours." Nathan didn't respond immediately. Instead, he walked along the beach's edge, reading signs she couldn't see: the height of the tide line, the direction of debris scatter, the complete absence of human footprints beyond their own. His trained eyes cataloged resources: bamboo groves, coconut palms, a freshwater stream trickling from the jungle's edge. Finally, he turned to where she stood, still clutching her useless phone like a talisman. "We need shelter before nightfall," he said simply. "Fire, water, food. In that order." Her laugh was bitter, tinged with hysteria. "I'm sure someone will spot us before we need to play Robinson Crusoe." "Maybe," he conceded, already collecting driftwood. "But hypothermia doesn't wait for rescue schedules." The first clash came when she tried to assume control, falling back on the only power structure she understood. "I've managed crisis situations before. I've overseen." "You haven't overseen anything like this." His interruption was quiet but final. "There's no delegation here, no assistance, no board to convince. There's only work and survival." She wanted to argue, remind him that she'd negotiated with Fortune 500 CEOs, that she'd rebuilt her company's Asian division from scratch. But the words died when she watched him strip bark with his bare hands, creating tinder with practical efficiency. Her designer heels sank into the sand with each step, and when she stumbled, sharp coral cut through Italian leather to her heel. The blood was bright against white sand, real in a way her world had never been. Nathan knelt beside her without hesitation, tearing strips from his shirt to bandage the wound. His hands were gentle despite their roughness. And for the first time since the crash, she felt something different from fear or anger. It might have been gratitude. It might have been something more. "Thank you," she managed, the words strange on her tongue. He simply nodded and returned to building their shelter, leaving her wondering when was the last time she'd thanked anyone for something that couldn't be built. By the third day, Olivia had learned that nature didn't negotiate. The sun rose and set on its own schedule, indifferent to her internal clock still set to New York time. Nathan had built a lean-to shelter from bamboo and palm fronds, engineering it with the same precision she once applied to spreadsheets. She watched him work, noticing how he used vines as rope, how he angled the roof to divert rain, how he positioned the shelter to block wind but catch morning light. Her contribution that first day had been gathering kindling, though it took 3 attempts to understand the difference between dry wood and simply dead. Her hands, soft from years of lotions and professional manicures, blistered within hours. She hid them at first, ashamed of her weakness, but Nathan noticed anyway. He showed her how to wrap them in torn cloth, how to grip with palms instead of fingers. Fire was their first shared victory. Nathan had made a bow drill from bamboo and vine, but his hands trembled with exhaustion after hours of trying. Without thinking, Olivia took over maintaining steady pressure while he controlled the speed, and together they coaxed smoke, then embers, then finally flame from friction. When the tinder caught, she actually laughed. Not the polished laughter of cocktail parties, but something raw and genuine. "I haven't felt this successful since my first hostile takeover," she admitted, then stopped herself, embarrassed by the comparison. But Nathan smiled, a rare expression that transformed his weathered face. "Fire's more useful than paperwork out here." Their first meal was fish he'd speared in the shallows, cooked over their hard-won fire. It was barely edible, burned outside and raw within, but she ate every bite. Hunger, she discovered, was the best seasoning she'd never wanted to taste. That night, the storm came without warning. One moment the stars were clear, the next rain hammered their shelter like bullets. The palm frond roof lasted exactly 10 minutes before water poured through. Lightning turned the beach into a strobing nightmare, and Olivia found herself pressed against Nathan's back, shaking not from cold but from primitive fear. "We're okay," he murmured, his voice steady despite the chaos. "I've weathered worse." She wanted to ask where, how, but thunder swallowed her questions. Instead, she focused on his breathing, using its rhythm to calm her racing heart. Dawn found them soaked but alive, and she realized she'd slept. Really slept, feeling safer in this stranger's presence than she'd felt in her penthouse with its state-of-the-art security system. Trust, it turned out, wasn't about contracts or background checks. Sometimes it was simply about someone standing firm while your world fell apart. The fourth night brought unexpected honesty. They sat feeding small sticks to their fire, the ocean providing nature's white noise. Olivia had spent the day failing to weave a basket, her fingers refusing to cooperate with Nathan's patient instructions. The frustration had nearly brought her to tears, not over the basket, but because failure wasn't something she'd allowed herself in years. "Why are you so calm about all this?" she finally asked, gesturing toward their primitive camp, their isolation, their uncertain future. Nathan stared into the flames for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of memories he usually kept buried. Afghanistan 2009. Our convoy was hit by an IED near Kandahar. 3 days in hostile territory with 2 wounded, waiting for an extraction that almost didn't come. He paused, adding another stick to the fire. "After that, everything else is just an inconvenience." She absorbed this, trying to reconcile the quiet man beside her with that level of violence and survival. "How do you not let it break you?" "It did break me." The admission was quiet but unyielding. "Coming home to Lily, my daughter, that's what put me back together. Different shape maybe, but functional." The mention of his daughter changed something in his expression, softening the hard lines. Olivia recognized the look. She'd seen it in mirrors when she thought about the life she'd never have time to live. "Tell me about her," she said, surprising herself with genuine curiosity. His smile was immediate and transformative. 7 years old but acts like 40. Reads everything she can find. Wants to be a marine biologist or a princess or both depending on the day. His voice caught slightly. "Her mom died 3 years ago. Breast cancer. Lily doesn't remember much, which is both a blessing and a curse." Olivia felt the words pull something from deep in her chest. "I'm sorry." "Me too." He turned to look at her directly. "What about you? What breaks someone who seems unbreakable?" She almost deflected, almost retreated behind corporate speak and careful distances. But the firelight and isolation made honesty feel less dangerous. I've never had anyone truly see me. Not my parents who saw an heiress. Not Daniel who saw a stepping stone. Not even myself anymore. Just the role I play. I see you, Nathan said simply. The words hung between them, heavy with possibility. Olivia felt exposed, vulnerable in a way that had nothing to do with their primitive circumstances. She'd been naked in boardrooms full of hostile investors and felt less seen than she did now in torn designer clothes with dirty hair and broken nails. That terrifies me, she admitted. Good, he responded. Terror keeps you honest. They sat in companionable silence after that, watching sparks rise toward stars that seemed impossibly bright without light pollution. For the first time in her adult life, Olivia wasn't planning the next quarter, the next acquisition, the next defensive strategy. She was just present, existing in the space between one breath and the next, between one heartbeat and its echo. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Food to find, water to gather, the endless work of survival. But tonight, she was learning that sometimes the most valuable thing you could possess was someone who saw through all your armor to the scared, hopeful human underneath. Days turned into weeks and something extraordinary began to happen. Olivia, the woman who had built a corporate empire, was learning to build a real life with her own hands. Nathan, the man who had learned not to trust easily, was teaching someone else to survive not just physically but emotionally. The island had become their classroom, their therapy, their second birth. Each sunset saw them different from what they'd been at dawn. Stronger, more vulnerable, more human. And somewhere between learning to make fire and spearfish, between survival and hope, they fell in love. Not Hollywood love, but real love. Raw, imperfect, forged in necessity and tempered by truth. When they were finally rescued, they realized that the question Olivia had asked that first desperate day had been prophetic after all. Not because they couldn't return to their old lives, but because they'd found something better. A life worth living together. Sometimes the best love stories begin with an accident. And sometimes the most absurd questions turn out to be the wisest ones. Did you love this incredible story? Hit like if you believe in true love and subscribe for more stories that will make you believe in miracles. Because sometimes when we lose everything we find the only thing that really matters.